And we're getting close. I saw the green screen. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to LSND Live Community Conversations. I am Jen Lee, the Executive Director at Legal Services of North Dakota, and I'm very excited to have Seth O'Neill today from the North Dakota Domestic and Sexual Violence Assault Coalition. Wait, did I do that right?
Close enough.
Seth, forgive me. NDDSVC is the easier way to say it, and I'm trying to get the full name out there. But very important work that Seth and his team are doing in North Dakota. And so, Seth, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us what NDDSVC does and is.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So, like Jen said, I'm the executive director of the North Dakota Domestic and Sexual Violence Coalition. Our organization was formerly known as Cause North Dakota, but last fall we changed our name to just make it easier and understandable for what we do. And so, our organization provides training and technical assistance to our 19 member programs located throughout the state that provide direct services. So, as the coalition, we don't provide direct services to victims of domestic and sexual violence. We kind of are the training, support, and policy arm for the 19 community-based programs that provide those direct services. So we serve as like a convener, bringing all of those programs together, as well as just working statewide on issues of domestic and sexual violence.
And your 19 members are statewide, so you cover the whole state in trying to get policy changes and advocacy and all that, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So we have programs based throughout the state in small communities from Ellendale, Lisbon, Washburn, to the larger four cities in North Dakota, as well as tribal-based programs in Spirit Lake and Turtle Mountain. And so our programs cover all 53 counties in North Dakota. And so wherever someone is in North Dakota, they can receive services from one of our community-based programs.
Very cool. And can you give some background on your organization and kind of how I know it's morphed over the years, and it's really cool though how you've all come together to create this coalition. What was like the impetus for creating this and then where it's now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our organization, we say, was officially founded in 1978. So we're coming up on 50 years here soon.
Wow.
And so at that time, as part of the battered women's movement, there was volunteers and communities that came together to say that violence against women was wrong, and they were helping victim survivors. And so in the 70s, those organizations slowly started to formalize into, nonprofit organizations, but mostly they were volunteers. And then at the time, they had came together. There was 5 programs that came together at the time in North Dakota and said, hey, we need to have a more formalized, networking or support system so that we can connect statewide on these issues. And so in 1978, a group of women came together to form what was called at the time the North Dakota Council on Abused Women's Services, or NDCAUS. And so it was kind of like a state networking office where they came together to work on policy and educational issues collaboratively because they found that they're stronger together than they were on their own. And so that was kind of the impetus for that. And then in 1979, our organization worked to pass the first domestic violence protection order bill in North Dakota. And so we worked with legislators on that as soon as we kind of got started. And that was the first big win, I would say, is passing that domestic violence protection order bill in 1979, which at the time it was a big win because that was viewed as something that you don't interfere with, that the court can't interfere with someone's marriage or personal life in that way. And so really the state took a stand and said no violence is wrong, and the state can intervene in these circumstances. So since then, we've worked on different policy and legislative issues, but that was kind of the start of our story. And obviously more programs have sprouted up over the course of the 50-year history.
That's actually pretty amazing. It's been 50 years because that it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it really has been 50 years of advocacy that you've contributed in North Dakota. So that's great. What So for those that aren't familiar with the coalition, and a lot of times I feel many people aren't familiar with the different nonprofits and the different coalitions that exist in North Dakota in any state, if they have never had to encounter it. And so they don't realize it's there. So as part of the coalition, what is the different member programs that you support? What do you, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you come together to create that supportive coalition with the
Yeah, so
members?
that's a good question. So, like as I mentioned, there's 19 member-based programs. If folks that are listening, you might know the ones in your community. The larger ones, the Abused Adult Resource Center in Bismarck, the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center in Fargo, the Community Violence Intervention Center in Grand Forks, and on and on. And so those programs, like I said, serve victims of domestic and sexual violence, and those are their primary purposes. So we have certainly a lot of allied partners, including LSND, but the coalition is made up of those programs that directly serve victims of domestic and sexual violence with things like protection orders, safe housing, um, they'll help just advocacy with different entities, as well as education and support, mental health services, all of those things that you think a victim
Mhm.
of domestic and sexual violence might need when they're trying to leave a situation that's unsafe for them. And so we come together by providing different networking opportunities, whether it's for the directors of those programs or the advocates that are on the front lines. We provide a lot of training opportunities. We just had a training last week for our directors where we talked about trauma-informed workplaces and making sure that we build resilient organizations because as you can imagine, this work is very difficult. And so we want to make sure we support the directors as well as the advocates who are working directly with victim survivors. And so that's really our role to bring people together, to train and equip them, but also to reach a broader audience, ensure that these issues make the headlines in appropriate ways. And so whether that's testifying at the legislature or writing op-eds or news articles or appearing with you today, just really getting that word out there that unfortunately domestic and sexual violence is happening every day in our state. But there are people that are trying to make a difference, and there certainly is help and support for people who need it.
Yeah, and I think people often maybe don't understand or don't realize all of the different things that are needed. It's not just people think, oh, you need a safe place to go for the night, or you need help writing a single protection order. It's like you said, the mental health, the safety, all of those different things. And so it's a lot of coming together to make it happen. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just even something simple as getting an ID or a birth certificate. Oftentimes, we know abusers will take those things or hold those things from victim survivors. And so, an advocate will help someone go get a birth certificate copy or a new driver's license or whatever those documents that you might need in order to get a job or to get on rental assistance or all of those things. And so, really, those basic things. Are important when you're trying to seek healing and safety.
yeah, and we've had this conversation before, but it seems like it would be like just one step, two step, like people can walk through it. But when you're traumatized and you're trying to deal with that, just putting one foot in front of the other, having that help is key to maintaining um, a living standard, even. So,
Yeah.
yeah. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about domestic violence in North Dakota and sexual assault? I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions out there these days.
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is like obviously movies and popular culture maybe interprets it a certain way, and maybe even what like a typical abuser or offender looks like, or acts like, maybe we have that idea in their head, but ultimately domestic and sexual violence happens to people regardless of socioeconomic status, race, religion. It really you see across cultures and communities. And so I think that's probably a misconception about it. Sometimes you see a couple or a family that looks completely, put together and normal, but that doesn't mean that we don't know certainly what's going on behind closed doors. I would say as well too, a lot of the abusive behavior isn't like physical, and so we see a lot of emotional abuse or controlling behavior where finances are controlled or the time is restricted, or like I had said, individuals don't have access to important documents like IDs, birth certificates, financial information. And so the behavior can look maybe innocent at some times, but if you notice a pattern of this behavior, it can certainly be concerning. And I guess another misconception is just that it doesn't happen or it's rare. And unfortunately, that's not true. Our organization, our 19 member-based programs, served around 8,000 people last year in North Dakota, and that's just the ones that our program served. There's certainly a lot more that are unserved, because we know about 1 in 4 women will experience domestic or sexual violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 9 men. And so that's a large number. Our population in North Dakota is approaching 800,000. So if you think 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 men, that's, I think I did the math one time, it's right around 250,000 or so. So very widespread, and it happens everywhere in North Dakota, in the big cities, in the small communities. And I think especially in the rural communities, it's difficult when the communities are so interconnected. And so a victim survivor doesn't feels it's difficult to speak up because of maybe the abuser has standing in the community. And so they're not sure if they'll get the help and support they need. And so I think those are just common misconceptions. I could certainly probably think of more, but there's definitely a lot of them.
It's hard because you're right. The smaller communities, you speak up and no one maybe believes you because the other person has the standing. And then I'm glad you mentioned that it's not just physical, because I saw a lot of that in private practice as a bankruptcy attorney. The financial abuse is very misunderstood on what financial abuse is. And so thank you for focusing on things other than just the physical abuse, because that emotional, financial, there's a few others too where it just kind of is not as easy to prove or show as a physical injury, but it's there. So.
Yeah, definitely. And another one that I can think of, just thinking about the power and control wheel, if folks aren't familiar, that's the kind of a wheel that describes the cycle and different aspects of domestic violence. But using children as kind of a pawn is a common one. And so if like saying, if you leave me, I'm going to keep the kids, and, kind of controlling the behavior of the kids in a way that a victim survivor feels like they have no choice but to stay. And so that's a common one as well.
That's a really good point. Yeah, if you don't know that control wheel, it's shown in a lot of trainings and gone through in a lot of trainings, but I don't know that it's a widely known tool. So that's a really good thing to look at out there. Besides working with the coalition, you do a lot of education and training and support for the coalition, but also in communities. What do you wish more professionals like landlords and employers and healthcare providers knew about the coalition and the type of work that you all do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I just would hope they know that they can reach out to us if they have questions. As we've gotten more media coverage of things lately, I've appreciated just hearing from folks if they have questions just generally about domestic violence or domestic violence laws or things. We're certainly available for help and support for the general public as well. But I think just I would hope that they would just be more aware of that, that issues are happening, that domestic and sexual violence happens, but also that there's help and support. So whether it's, an employer that sees an employee struggling, they can know that there's a place to refer them for support, or landlords, there's certain restriction, or there's certain laws that protect victims of domestic violence. And so I think it's important for landlords to be aware of those. And so, just generally, I would just encourage people to think more critically about these issues in our communities.
And I think some of it too comes back to recognizing that some problem may not be as readily apparent, like someone showing up late every day, or it's these smaller issues for employers or something like that, that there's a bigger underlying issue. And if you just focus on the problematic behavior, but not the underlying issue, I have found that education in that area works to at least bring it to attention of people. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes we just view the behavior and don't think of what's causing that behavior, whether it's like a landlord seeing that an apartment is trashed or something, but ultimately it's the abuser that comes in and trashes the apartment and then leaves, and then the victim survivor gets blamed, or an employee showing up late for work because their abusive partner kind of held them at home or whatever. And so I think it is important to think critically and just understand that there might be other things causing that behavior.
yeah, and I think that's a lot of the training that you all have done, and I've attended your trainings, and we're co-hosting a training next month at the SBAN conference. And so I think that just understanding that there's all these different facets to it. It's not just like very narrow domestic violence is this, or and it's really important to understand, because I feel that's the beginning of creating a better system. So
Absolutely.
do you, from the legal, navigate the legal system? I know you don't directly represent or do a lot of direct representation. You help with the DVPOs, you'll help with your coalition members with those things. Navigating the legal system, do you find that that's a very difficult thing for people to do and get into the system, coming out of an abusive relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be very difficult. Yeah, I've represented victims of domestic violence through our All-ND legal project, mainly with civil protection orders, and it can be very scary and intimidating, especially when you maybe have to face your abuser in court. And I think protection orders are a good first kind of step in that process to ensure that a victim survivor and possibly their kids have that physical safety. But as we know, there's a lot more, perhaps a divorce or child custody issue. But I think it can be difficult because it can be difficult to prove some of these things in court, and especially when we talk about that emotional or financial abuse. Those things can sometimes look innocent on the surface, like, oh, he just controlled the finances, he was just being helpful, but maybe it was more than that, or oh, he was just a strict parent, or whatever, And so I think that can be difficult, as well as a lot of these things happen behind closed doors. There's not pictures or evidence, and so that can be definitely difficult to prove. And so oftentimes victims find it difficult to go up and testify and be subject to cross-examination when they're in, a difficult emotional place and just trying to seek safety and support. And so we do our best to certainly the victims that we help, just making sure that they're prepared for those. We are the certified entity for Rule 34 advocates. And so those advocates can help assist petitioners with filling out the protection order paperwork, and they can also sit with them during court. They can sit up there at the stand, and so that does provide that emotional support when they're dealing through that difficult time. But certainly, I think attorneys are an important part of this process. We also provide training and support for judges and attorneys as well, just to get them to kind of understand the intricacies of domestic violence, as well as just the laws in North Dakota regarding protection orders and family law and different things. But it's certainly a difficult system. We provide training to law enforcement as well, just to make sure that there's knowledge regarding these issues and what help is available. But yeah, I would say that the legal system, wasn't designed in mind for victims of domestic violence. And so we're constantly trying to make sure we can improve that system to offer better support.
I'm glad you brought up the Rule 34 advocates. Can you talk for people who don't know what Rule 34, what that is? Can you just briefly, like we don't do a full training, but can you briefly talk about what a Rule 34 advocate is?
Absolutely. So our organization is the certified entity under the North Dakota Supreme Court Administrative Rule 34. And so what that means is that we train and certified advocates. And so they have to go through initial legal issues training where we provide just information on the protection order system. Legal Services provides a lot of the education for us during that training on the protection order system. And then we have a judge come in, a defense attorney, law enforcement to provide those different perspectives on the protection order system. And so these advocates receive that initial training. They have to pass a test, and then they are a certified advocate. Those advocates are affiliated with one of our member programs, so they're not just working independently on their own. And then throughout their time as a certified advocate, they have to do continuing education. And so they continue to, get updated on the latest domestic violence protection order issues, as well as different topics. And then as part of their role as a certified advocate, as I mentioned earlier, they can assist the petitioner with filling out that paperwork. They help them file it in court, and then they can sit with them at the court hearing. And oftentimes the advocates, because they spend so much time in court, can just provide good insight to the victim survivor on what to expect in court, how it'll happen, as well as, what a certain judge might do. And so when I even represent victim survivors as an attorney, I always leaned heavily on the advocate because they're really the eyes and ears and experience a lot of what's happening in that local courtroom. And so they really are amazing at what they do and a central part of the system, especially in North Dakota where we have a shortage of attorneys. Just having that legal support is huge as we try to serve victim survivors in North Dakota.
Thank you for explaining that, because I think that it's such an important part of what we have, and it's not widely known sometimes. I think that there is this advocacy program out there. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So if anyone is looking to reach out to you or a member, or are there any upcoming events, anything like that you want to tell our audience about, anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if anyone is looking for information or even help and support, if they go to our website, NDDSVC.org, we have a lot of good information on there. There's a Find Help tab that'll bring you to like a map. And so you can click on what county or tribal community you live in, and it'll tell you the closest program where you can seek help and support. And so you can click on any of those. And so that is a good place. Also on there, you can sign up for like our newsletter. So if there's any events that are open to the public, you can see those on there as well. And so that really does serve as kind of a basis for a lot of different things that we're doing. You can check out our social media, of course. As far as upcoming events, you mentioned the presentation at the SBN that we're co-hosting with you. We have that going on. We don't have anything for the summer that's really scheduled yet, but we certainly are in the process of planning things for late summer and fall. And so if folks sign up for the newsletter, they can certainly see what we have going on. But also on the website, you can contact me or other members of my team if you have any questions or, things you're looking for help and support on.
You. And one of the reasons why you probably don't have anything quite going on yet is the legislative session just ended. And you were very active in getting some important bills passed and also, I think, shut down that would not have been helpful to victims. Are there any of those that you would like to call attention to that
Yeah,
Or
absolutely. So yeah, it was a very busy legislative session advocating for and against some bills. And so one we advocated for was kind of a revamp of the domestic violence protection order process, along with the sexual assault restraining order and disorderly conduct restraining order. So those are three civil protection orders we have, and they were currently in different areas of the Century Code, and they kind of had conflicting provisions, some of them. And so we worked with the Supreme Court on a bill to put them all into one area of Century Code and then clarify some of the provisions and making sure they're consistent with each other. And so for that, it should just allow for a more seamless process for individuals seeking those support. Another bill that we worked to testify against and oppose was a shared parenting time bill for family law. And so that one would presume 50-50 custody or parenting responsibility for parents for their kids instead of looking at what's best in the best interest of the child, which is what we do now. And so that one is certainly controversial, but we ultimately took the stance that we should look at what's best for the child and not necessarily what's best for the parents or just presume something. We should give the court more flexibility to look at these things individually rather than a broad presumption. And so that one was ultimately voted down, but we expect that issue to keep coming back as it has before. And so we're just constantly looking at whatever bills are proposed and thinking about how would this help or hurt victims of domestic and sexual violence. And so if there's bills that we think will help, we certainly support those, but if they're ones that we're worried might be critical, I try to reach out to the bill sponsor and try to make sure I understand the bill before I would oppose it, because I think sometimes it's difficult to understand what a bill will do before we really look at it and speak to the bill sponsor and the different people that are supporting it. And so, yeah, we have a lot of good, strong allies at the legislature that work in a bipartisan manner to support these issues, and we're certainly thankful for them.
well, thank you, Seth. And I'm glad that you all are able to take a look at this and be those advocates out there, because it's really important for the legislature to understand what the effects are sometimes of what they're doing, because I think that gets missed. They're like, oh, this sounds great. And then they don't realize exactly what it does to the legal system. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the information you've given us about NDDSVC and what you all are doing. And I hope people reach out to you. And your website's fantastic. So if you are looking for anything related to Seth and NDDSVC, I will put the website into the description of the live stream so that everyone can click on it. But I appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's listening.
Yep. And I will see everyone next week on LSND Live on Monday morning. Thank you all. Have a great day.